We are Jolly Fellows.
Jolly Fellows recording a podcast.
Lemons, lemonade.
Apples. Is that something they say?
I don't know.
Lemons? Or do you... Well, welcome, viewers. Viewers?
Yeah, viewers, why not? Welcome to another episode of That Reminds Me Of. And today is another Myth episode, Doc.
Yes, Myth. How good is Myth? It's one of my favourite things.
It's great. It is very artsy film festival-y. When you get into the thick of it, you got to prepare yourself for some very artsy films and some more entertaining films as well, and everything in between. And that's part of the journey and the fun of it.
Yeah, I feel like this one is uber artsy, this Myth.
Yes.
And I'm liking it. But once it's done, I'll probably really like to sit down to a Michael Bay with you, crack open a bottle of wine, sit down and watch Michael Bay.
I cannot wait for something just really fluffy after this.
Yeah,
we will do that
movie.
for sure.
Yeah, good. But for today, let's head into the wilderness of art films.
Yes.
With She Dies Tomorrow by Amy Seimetz. Seimetz.
I read it as Seimetz. Yep.
Good.
And I guess as a quick disclaimer before we get into the synopsis, we've alluded to the fact that there's a lot of artsy films in this festival, and we are two regular film buffs that are on the journey of this festival, taking in all the delights that come with it. And we just wanted to remind people that we are both giant film buffs, but we're not really critics. And, we are very aware that these are films made by indie filmmakers, some of them are well established. And the last thing we want to do is offend anybody. And so what we're doing is coming at this from a, what do you like? What do I like? What don't you like? What don't I like? Kind of vibe. And just two film buff friends riffing, really. And we hope that people take away something from what we have to say.
That sounds like a disclaimer for us not knowing what we're talking about, Aaron. Is that essentially what you're saying?
We have undersold us deeply enough to get away with anything now?
We have no right to say anything about anyone.
And that therefore gives us the right to say whatever we want somehow.
So She Dies Tomorrow. I watched this, when was it? Last night, I think. Last night. You would have seen it in the last few days as well.
Yes, I did. I saw it a couple of days ago. It was the first off my list. We have 3 films that we've been watching over the last few nights, and this was the first on my list. And part of the reason it is because the premise was so knockout and just seemed so interesting that I just wanted to grab onto this one first. It just sounded like fun.
Yeah, this wasn't in our original list of 8, was it? This was one that we just felt compelled to add to the list. So we've added it at the last minute along with Shirley, which was also a late addition.
Yes, and Miff did a bit of a sneaky and added a few extra films mid-festival. Yeah. Very tempting.
Well, why don't we just go straight into synopses?
I agree.
And discuss what it's about. So I'll go. I think you might have had a couple.
I think it's your turn.
Okay, so this is all based on a simple premise, really, of a young woman, Amy, who gets this idea in her head that she's going to die tomorrow, and she spends the first act of the film kind of wallowing in her own place, going a bit stir crazy and getting drunk and touching up the walls and like getting all inward and contemplative about the fact that she's going to die tomorrow. She calls her friend for support. Her friend comes over, and then bang, all of a sudden the friend's got the same thoughts in her head. The friend then spreads it to her brother and to her brother's friends, and eventually you find that just about everyone on the planet is compelled to think that they're going to die tomorrow. I'm not sure there's much else in it plot wise to that. Can you add much? Like we do add, as the film goes on, we go back a step and we see how Amy, got this thought into her head as well, from a guy she was seeing.
Yes, that she's caught. She's not sort of ground zero for this disease. She's caught it from somebody else. That's right. I think that sums it up. Basically, this idea is so infectious that whoever, and I can't tell if you have to be in the presence of somebody or if you just have to hear somebody say, "I'm going to die tomorrow," or it's a combination of the both that makes this disease get passed on to the next person. Whatever it is, we are following the path of destruction, starting pretty much from Amy until that flashback happens. And each little scenario is just like a little dramatic kind of artsy scene within itself, a little short film with the only thread being that there's everyone in the room is eventually going to believe that they're going to die the next day. And it just goes from one to the next. And that's the whole film. You've got it.
That is the film. So I feel that's why I was so keen to do this synopsis, because there's not much to synopsis.
It's an easy one.
It's an easy one because it's... So let's start perhaps with just the concept, and that's what drew us to it. And it's a pretty cool concept. So props to everyone involved for that concept. Like, do you agree? That's a good starting point.
It's a great starting point. It pulled me in. I had to see it just based on the concept. And I'd actually heard of this film before MIF, and I cannot remember where I heard it. But even just in that conversation, the synopsis was like, the title was then in my head. I was like, okay, as soon as that's available, I'm definitely watching it. It sounds great. I think people are in love with the synopsis. I mean, the premise. I don't think I don't know how many people are in love with the film, because I can be upfront right away and say I am not in love with this film. I am the opposite of in love with this film. Look, I love the premise.
I tend to agree. I think there's positives and negatives to talk about. The concept, the starting point being one of the positives, but it lost me in spots as well. Do you want to talk about anything in particular? Should we? The way I read it was really looking at it in stages and scenes, like as you said, and the first act, when she is wallowing in her own home, that was probably the bit that I liked least. I found that
awful.
Yeah, I felt they had so much awful going to awful. They had so much sort of capital to play with, in that, I was ready to love this journey, and I kept liking it, but then it just dragged on so long in that, they were even repeating the music for effect, and
which didn't work, in my opinion.
No, rather than doing anything for the film, it was actually making me think. It was more my mental state of having to go around in these same sort of things over and over again.
Kind of like if Groundhog didn't have Bill Murray in it, and it was pretty much just some regular Joe who you cared nothing for, except you had to watch him live the same boring day over and over again. Yeah. That is sort of how that first act felt, and I was so devastated because you have this such promise of this premise, and then all of the hot air was just like let out of it, and instantly, like in that first 20 minutes, all gone, and then they had to build all of the goodwill again from the beginning, like from scratch, and I just don't think they ever managed to get all that goodwill of that premise back.
That's so well put. That's exactly how I felt. They had the goodwill, they lost it, and then were valiantly trying to get it back. Like I was on board with some of the stuff in the, last 2/3 of the film.
Me too.
Had they not lost me early on. For example, the friend character Jane.
She was the highlight for me as well. Good. Okay, two reasons. Great actress.
Yeah,
ever since I saw her in Hung, I've just thought she's great, right?
Yeah.
And in this, she doesn't disappoint. She's fantastic. She's eccentric and in a really interesting way, and she's and subtle at the same time. Just a great performance.
Yeah, she rescued it, really,
Yeah.
I thought. Nothing against the rest of the cast, or the film, really. But she came along and she grabbed me, and I just found her very compelling.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I will say that I was disappointed with the lead actress, Kate Lyn Sheil, I think her name is. I
Yeah.
just and I recognize her, and I know that she can do better. Like I've seen her in other things, where and she's been great, but she was just so flat in this, and it was like what you get in that first act when she's alone in the apartment. It's like
Yeah.
that's her character for the rest of the film, and it doesn't really she doesn't go anywhere. She just almost flatlines the whole way through the entire film.
Yeah, that's true. But I'm going to play devil's advocate and defend it a little, in that we see her starting point from being this like catatonic state. So I think as a performance, she's stuck with that for starters. And then we see her when we go in the flashback, we actually see a different side of her. And I think that made an impact on me because we hadn't seen the real, person yet.
Okay.
So I enjoyed seeing her liven up in the, like that's what she really is. Oh, okay. She was a real girl before.
Yeah. So okay, let me think about that because I actually agree. Maybe if she'd started off sort of this dull version of herself, and then we'd had that flashback at a certain point, learnt actually she's quite a fun person, and then like by the end of the film, she changes in some way. I'd be up for that journey. Like I think that's kind of a cool journey. But it doesn't go that way.
No, I agree.
It's a fair point though. Like I think it's nothing to do with her ability. I think that she's been given a role that's not many actresses would be envious of. Like it's just pretty flat. Yeah. It's a leading role, but it doesn't really. She hasn't got much to play with.
And like you alluded to, if you almost did a different edit of the film, her performance might look completely different.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not sure. Can I go straight into a reminds me just because it relates?
Yeah, please.
Just messing with the rules here, Baron.
Throw it out the window. A little bit like this film, yeah? In terms of the rules, just, we don't care about the rules.
That's true. For those who haven't listened to the show before, the premise of this show is that we talk about the films that this film reminded us of. So this is what I'm doing here.
Great. Just in case there's disclaimers for this episode. Yeah.
It reminded me of Another Earth.
Oh, okay.
You've seen Another Earth?
Yes.
And firstly, the performance of the lead actor reminded me a bit of Brit Marling.
Yeah, I can see that
in all of her roles, where it's just this very mysterious, not giving much away in the face, a lot of pensive looks out of windows, and that sort of thing. So I feel like that might have been a reference for her in the performance. I don't know.
I can imagine that was the reference. Like, we want something like this. We want something like this, and that would actually make total sense. Yeah, that would make total sense. Yeah, okay. No, I like that. That's a very cool reference. I think there were definitely moments and scenes that kind of saved the film a little bit. Most of them involved the friend. Yeah, Jane. Jane, and she kind of was the light of the whole film. And there were it really blew my mind because they had these cameos by these great actors in really, really small parts that still weren't interesting enough to lift the whole film. Like they were close. It felt so close. I just wanted Michelle Rodriguez, for instance, to just do something unusual, make that little scene a little 4 Rooms style short film of some sort that just lifts the whole thing. And it just didn't really quite get there. Such a shame because, I mean, as you're following this journey, there's all these moments where they could have been, and I think 4 Rooms is a great reminds me of for this actually. It just popped into my head, but You could get
Which film?
4 Rooms. It's the
Yeah.
Have you seen it with the 4 short stories by Tarantino, Rodriguez, and I've forgotten who did the other 2.
I think so. I can't recall it very well.
Yeah, and it's got the thread of a bellhop that's sort of like the common thread across 4 hotel rooms where there's totally different stories happening. So this feels a little bit like that. We've got the thread of the main character with the disease infecting all these people, but really they're all just little 4-room style short films. Which should have been perfect for this. I mean, it should have been they should have been able to nail that. Like, it just seems like such a great, tight premise. There's no way that should be able to fail. That's what baffles me about this film. It's so bizarre. And the writer-director is a showrunner on The Girlfriend Experience. It's a very successful TV show. Like, I find it hard to understand how this isn't like knocked out of the park, this one.
Yeah, I think it could have been with not many tweaks, really. And the tone just was a bit off for me throughout the thing and a bit hard to pin down. Like, the synopsis on, at least on the Myth website, I think calls it a comedy horror or comedy horror, something like that.
Yeah.
And I'd be struggling to find the comedy in it.
No, I didn't find very much of it funny at all. I thought that Jane was quirky and interesting. I didn't find it like laugh out loud funny or any of the other moments to be very, very funny at all.
And I'm not saying it needed to be. Like, no. It could have worked not being funny at all, but the fact that maybe it's billed as comedy, if you're trying to get some comedy out of it, there would have been many, many opportunities, I think, to play it for comedy. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, it's got this sort of psychedelic horror quality to it as well. Did you notice that? Like, it felt like they were aiming for that. They were sort of shooting for psychedelic horror, and it didn't none of that quite worked either. I mean, they had crazy lighting and just the way the disease infects people is they're standing there in the kitchen just chopping something, and all of a sudden blue and red lights start flashing all around them, and that's the moment, you know. Or maybe the music changes slightly. I can't really remember. But next thing you know, they're struck with this sense of doom that tomorrow it's all over, and their face drops.
Yeah.
I mean, it should have been gold. That should have been gold. Like, the concept's there.
It was interesting to see the different reactions. Like, that's one of the things that obviously they were trying to bring out, how different people take that news. Like, some start just telling the truth. Some one guy just wants to make out. Some get all angry, you know. So that's an obvious but, you know, nice point of the film, I guess.
I suppose we need to also mention the timing of this film. Like, this is a COVID film through and through, and the whole film feels like COVID. Like, it's bare bones. There's like 3 locations. You get the feeling that there's like 2 crew and just the most essential people on set plus the cast, and that's just the vibe of it. And like, even the storytelling feels COVID somehow. I don't know.
Well, it's a virus that's spreading.
Yeah.
You know, how more COVID do you get? If we go into another, reminds me of Bird Box. It was so similar in premise to Bird Box, I found.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, it's a great point.
I think I've used that one for something else before, but basically it's a psychological illness, you know, that just gets spread crazily from person to person, but just a mindset.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great point. And they even have that same moment where they just happen to have seen the thing, and suddenly they're overtaken, right?
Yeah.
It really reminded me of It Follows. Did you ever see that film?
Yeah, I think I loved that.
I loved It Follows. I thought it was great. That's a sexually transmitted disease.
That's right. Yeah.
Like a sexually transmitted haunting, I guess, is really what it is.
Yeah.
And it just there were some similarities that I felt with this idea of, like a little group of people trying to kind of get together and outwit this thing or just try to get away from it. Although there's so much more kind of acceptance in this film. Nobody's trying to beat it. There's no sense that you can beat it at any point in the film. It's just everyone just goes, yep, that's it. Tomorrow, game over. And then they just get sullen, you know?
I think I would have liked an ending in this one.
Yeah.
Like an explosion or anything as a release valve.
I totally agree. It's funny. And that's coming from a guy who's not really a genre guy. You're looking for some genre tropes. You're like, give me something, people.
Oh, yeah. In some of the other films we're talking about, I'd take the completely opposite view. Like I don't like things tied up in a bow, but with this one, it was so short of action that I just wanted something to happen and surprise me. But again, it lost it all in that first bit. I think if they just cut that down a bit and added another couple of crazy scenes where it's been spread to someone else, that might have done it.
And just taken the great characters and moments that they already had in the script and elevated them, just made them a little more bombastic, a little less the same, a little less depressing. That could have done it. I totally agree. Yeah. Well, I haven't got a lot more to add about this film. I don't want to pile too much on it. I think that there's some great ideas in it. I just don't think that it's executed as well as it should have been to pull off those ideas. Yeah,
completely agree. And just quickly, any other performances that you liked? One that stood out as just someone I knew was the
doctor.
Well, who was the doctor? I almost thought it was Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah, I know. It isn't. I can't remember the guy's name, but you've seen him in tons of things, like lots of movies, and he's normally quite a character. And again, in this, he looked kind of awkward. Just felt a bit off his usual kind of charismatic self.
I did like the little nuance of him when he was infected. He had the opportunity to just make out with this random chick, and he chose, no, I've got to go back to my wife. I thought that was nice. Yeah, definitely. Not obvious and a good twist.
I agree. So, but which actor were you talking about? Which character?
The brother of Jane. I've forgotten his name. I saw him in The Sinner. I seem to mention The Sinner every episode.
Yeah, I know, the last couple. I
he was pretty
know
good.
The actor. He's good. He's solid. And his relationship with Jane, his sister, who's super annoying and artsy and kind of crazy. She wears pajamas over to their house, and they're not that surprised by it. That relationship's really fun.
Yeah. What did you think about the friends of the brother and his wife? I thought they were fairly wooden.
I didn't buy any of that, honestly. Yeah. I thought there was an interesting idea in there that you've got this couple that have been together for ages and are clearly not that into each other, like everyone can see it, and they're only just coming to terms with it. Interesting concept. Again, I didn't really find much interesting in there or much to buy into with the two of them. They were a bit flat. Yeah.
I think this could have really done with maybe another 6 months of re-editing and workshopping. Yeah, it feels like maybe it was a great idea, hastily executed. But I'm not going to be too judgmental on that because it is an indie film and it's so hard. Like the director is an actor as well. She must have so many projects on the go, and to just get a film bloody made and have it stand up and be in festivals and everything, that's a pretty good effort,
isn't it? Yeah, it's always the thing is you can be as and this is sort of what we're getting to at the beginning of the episode was just sort of like you can be very judgmental and criticize films for all sorts of things, but just making a film and getting it out there in the world is just a mammoth task in itself. Yeah, and I always have so much respect for filmmakers that just get it done.
I struggle to write a short story alongside my day job. So. How some of these people do it, I don't know, and I think I didn't like the film much at all, really. But I don't think it was that far away from being a killer film. Like
I agree.
it could have been great. It wasn't that far away.
And I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see Amy Seimetz come out with something else based on just the quality of the premise and what she was able to do with the film. Even though it's, I feel, flawed, she's proven that she's got something. She's got a vision. She's definitely got a great sense of like premise and really great ideas. I just feel like the whole thing probably needed to be worked over, like you say, a bunch more. But hey, she got it done. She got it done during COVID times. Actually, I don't know if it was during COVID times or just before. I can't quite tell where it lands.
It couldn't have been during COVID times, could it?
No, I think people are just aligning it with COVID because of the theme.
You align to bugs crawling up a wall to COVID these days. Like
That's true.
It's just what you do. I think we've said in every film, this is so a COVID film, or this is a film of the times.
Yeah.
No matter when they're made.
That's true. It's easy to do, isn't it?
Cool. Well, I think that's it for this episode. Let's get out of here and record another one of our next films.
Absolutely. See you soon, Doc.
See you, Baron.